I've just been participating in your course about intuitive storytelling. What is the intuitive storytelling, and how do you work to get in touch with stories which are more intuitive?
Well, there's storytelling, and that's a thing that's been happening forever. Humankind have been telling stories forever, for as long as there's been language. And then there's storytelling as it exists in the modern world now, which in many ways is you could say, a revival of what was. Because in the industrialized world, we've lost most of the old folk lines, you could call them, of direct lines of stories that were told from one teller to the next, to the next, to the next. Industrialization severed most of those connections. We no longer have storytellers alive now who have learnt their stories from a line like that. So most storytelling as it happens in the Western world, except on the very fringes, the sort of the Celtic fringes or the northern fringes, most of the storytelling that exists in the world now is a revival where people are trying to recover the old folk tales and bring them back to life. Intuitive storytelling is a way of going directly to the source of all stories. And I actually think it's a way of going right back to the original storytelling that we had when we were very much at the dawn of human consciousness, where the shamans or the wild, wise people, kind of people that these days we put into lunatic asylums or mental hospitals, they were very, very much honoured within the tribe for the gifts that they had of being able to be on the edge between this regular world and the world beyond. And I believe that much of what they brought through and the ways that they brought it through was story. Because human beings have always used story to describe what's not understandable, what's not explainable. Stories are a great way of us touching into and making sense of what our minds don't understand. So that's what we do with intuitive storytelling. That's what I teach people to do, is to go to what I call the mythic realm, which is that place where stories are part of our being. They're part of who we are. They're part of our reality, but it's a reality we often ignore. In the modern age, again, we've kind of got cultured out of stories. We have different stories now that are less mythological. We're absorbed by stories that are in many ways more factual. We read the news, or we go on Facebook and we find out what someone just did. That kind of storytelling has always been around. Right from the dawn of time, people would just sit around the fire and say what happened today. What's going on? What did you learn today? But there would be a crucial part of it, which is, well, what do you not understand? And those stories that would come in would connect people to the realm that we'll never understand, that's beyond our conscious mind, and yet that is truly part of us. You could even say it's a more real part of us, because our thinking mind obscures that essence. It obscures our true nature. And when we can find ways of going beyond the thinking mind, we can rest in that true nature and sort of feel it's ours, it's closer, we have a relationship to it. And that's what we've just spent the weekend doing. We've just spent the weekend diving into that place and feeling it's not a strange land, it's actually where we belong.
Yeah. I liked the metaphor you had, like to have the bridge from like this world to the other world.
Yeah.
And like the stories are bridging between this world and the unconscious.
Yeah.
And what I really liked was like to, as you said, like something I don't understand or something I'm not conscious about or something in my unconscious can get some expression.
Yeah.
And it can also be interpreted different ways.
Yeah.
So I felt like it was a huge gift of hearing stories, and also what I also love with your course is that here I can tell stories, and I can tell my own stories, and I can listen to other people creating a story about me or my life or my team.
Yeah.
And I think that has also been lost with all the technology and Facebook and news and
right.
we are not really listening to ourselves.
Yeah.
Can you tell about how do you get in contact with this mythical realm? How do you connect to it? Or
Yeah, well, we're all story beings. We all know story intimately. We've grown up with stories. We've heard thousands of stories, and yet it tends to be, for most adults, it tends to be something that they slowly feel more and more disconnected from. And you maybe have just a little immersion of it when you go to the cinema or when you get lost in a TV series or something like that. So we kind of need that. And yet, being somehow in the story, being involved in the story, is, as you're saying, it's an unusual thing, and yet it's a precious thing. It's something that I think we have a hunger for, because if we can have access to story as a way of understanding ourselves better and understanding our lives better, then we can digest what's unknown, what's unexplained. We can digest it for ourselves. And we can make sense of it in our lives, and then we can move on. So I see storytelling and stories as a really vital way of navigating. It's a way that human beings have always navigated, because in the modern age we tend to think life is known. Science has become the sort of the dominant paradigm of our times, and science is always about making the best guess at reality that you can. And that's, it's an incredibly powerful method, but it leaves out a lot that cannot be explained, that can't be understood, and that actually that sort of mental approach, scientific approach, isn't even appropriate. That it runs to the shadows as soon as you start looking for it. Actually, quantum mechanics starts to discover these kind of things that, science actually starting to kind of actually come back on itself and realise that consciousness is primary, and the mystery of life is the basis for everything we're experiencing. So why not tell stories? Why not acknowledge that we don't actually understand what we're in the middle of? Life is actually this huge mystery. And then stories becomes a playful way of exploring that mystery, of entering into it, accepting it, that we don't actually know what we're doing, what this world is for, or what we're here for. We don't know any of that. Embrace that uncertainty, step into that. It's like the door of intuition opens, and what we're calling for comes through the door. Our heart's longing, if we can get really clear about that, if we can open to the vulnerability of I just don't know and I don't understand this part of my life, that's a call to our intuition to come to us. That's a call for stories. It always has been. If a tribe was faced with something they didn't understand, they'd sit round and the prized shaman would do his thing, or his or her thing, go into a trance, go to a dream, live with it for several days. And the tribe would be supporting that. They'd maybe be drumming and dancing and wanting that revelation to come. Well, we can do that for ourselves. We can do that now. That's what intuitive storytelling is like a modern day invitation to. That don't just live with the suffering, but inquire into it. Recognise the places where life is tough and how it's tough. And then turn towards that rather than away from it. Turn towards it and be vulnerable to it. And then the method of intuitive storytelling, the techniques that I teach, are just a simple step-by-step way of taking that vulnerable place to an invitation to your intuition and then receiving a story. It's actually quite simple. I make it sound a little bit mystical, but I mean, you've done it several times this weekend, haven't you?
Yeah.
And how was that for you?
I think it was... amazing is a well-used word, but it's, as you said, I feel like I was getting tired in the beginning, to touch into this vulnerable space, and a little bit this unconscious, which I, in my daily life, want to kind of avoid.
Right.
So it's first, I feel like there's a vulnerability that needs to. But when I actually tap into it and go into it, I enjoy being there.
Right.
I enjoy to tell the story because I don't know actually what's coming out of my mouth. Sometimes I get as you guided us to kind of wait for for a symbol or wait for a picture or a figure to come, and then just following that thread and just sharing that and not even know where the end is going. But then it has some magic in it when I dare to trust, when I dare to be vulnerable,
right,
and also not take myself so serious.
Yeah.
Have play with it and fun with it.
Yeah.
And so then I really enjoyed it, and really I feel like I got a new language to tap into this.
Right.
And I'm grateful for that. Yeah. Any advices for people who might listen, or how to, because Joseph Campbell is kind of famous for this.
Yeah.
And I'm using the Wildman in the fairytale of the Wildman.
Yeah.
Does it help to read more fairy tales, or for people who might not take your course, or where to begin for people if they are interested in this?
Yeah, if you want to have more of this in your life, then reading folktales is a great start. Joseph Campbell, as you mentioned, is an amazing doorway to the mythic realm. I mean, that guy, he was an American academic, for those who hadn't heard of him, but he was also a mystic. He read every single story that had ever been committed to paper or papyrus or stone or anything that was still accessible. Joseph Campbell read, and he did this for about his whole lifetime, basically, from when he was a young man. And then he wrote these extraordinary books which tap right into the essence of what we're talking about here, which are that human beings have always lived in this mythic place. We've always, our worldview has been shaped by the mythic until now, until the modern age. So every civilization, every people, every tribe, they've both viewed the world, it's not a both, they have viewed the world with mythic eyes, because the way they've seen the world has been informed by the stories they tell each other about the world, why the world is as it is. And the human nervous system, the human brain, the human way of perceiving reality has been shaped by the stories we've heard, by the dreams we've had, by the shaman's visions, as I was saying, that have come through to us in terms of story. And it's been a vital way of looking at the world. And because often the stories were inspired by shamanism or by people able to step between the worlds, mystics and so on, it enabled people, even people whose work was mundane, it enabled them nonetheless to have ready access to a way of perceiving themselves that was more than the everyday. They had an access to the divine remembrance of who they were. And that was one way that mythic stories, that the mythic realm was a blessing for people. It kind of opened them to that. And I really think the modern world is letting us down. The modern paradigm we have is letting us down, because we no longer have a mythic way of looking at things. And that means that the unknown gets shut out. What can't be explained is now denigrated and made invalid.
Right.
And that's tragic, because it leaves all of us with this sense of, I know there's more to life, I know there's more to me, but I can't find it. And I don't know how to place it, and I don't know where it exists on the map of reality and of myself that I've been given. So then people get a bit mad with it. They get a bit psychotic, or just in a tiny way psychotic. We're all a bit psychotic in the modern age, because we are not just this tiny little thing. We're not what science tells us we are, or at least conventional science. Like I said, the quantum mechanics stuff is beautifully confounding all previous scientific paradigms, but that's still a bit fringy. It's not the mainstream paradigm we're living with. The mainstream paradigm we live with is Newtonian. It's the physical world is everything, and there's nothing else other than what you can measure. And that's just not true for a human being. We were never made to live in a universe like that. And yet we do, and I think that's part of the suffering that we have. The stories we tell do not remind us of our divinity.
Yeah. Yeah, because that also brings us to the healing stories or healing fairy tales, which I know you also are sharing a lot. And that the stories both give hope but also give certain kind of healing.
Yeah.
How so? How can a story heal people? Or
Well, I guess anything that leaves you feeling more connected and whole, that is literally a healing. And if the story that you can watch, you go to the cinema and watch a movie, and there are some amazing movies out there at the moment. I'm a lover of movies. I think they are, when well done, which is rarely, but it does happen when they're well done, they open us up to a feeling of connection and wholeness. Storytelling, I think, is another way. It's a unique way of opening people up to that kind of remembrance. And definitely the stories that I'm interested in telling, they have that intention, is that in the listening, you come back to a remembering of who you are and of your true nature. And what we've been working with this weekend is when you work with one other person, what you find is that the story that comes through you gets informed by their presence. And you found that and people in the workshop were finding the same. It's magic in a way that you can't help but pick up on someone else's presence and what's needed from them. So we call forth from each other that kind of healing. And that's just easy. Or rather, it's just like, it's innate. We're all ready to do that kind of healing. Simply if we come present, if we tap into our vulnerability and our creativity, then we respond to what's there. And our response is an expression of the divine intelligence. And anyone receiving that gets reminded of that in them. And that's healing. Beautiful.
I feel healed and I feel more connected to myself and to something bigger and into the stories. And yeah, had an amazing weekend. So thank you for your work. Continue doing it. I really love it. And
nice.
Thank you for the interview.
Yeah, thank you.
Ciao for now.